All right, and let's go to our main topic of the day. We're talking about drugs.
Yeah, drugs.
This is prescription, this is illegal, this is alcohol, and all of that fun stuff.
So, give us a rundown on the history of drugs in professional wrestling.
So, professional wrestling is a very grueling sport.
Yes.
And there has been evidence of painkillers and all of that going through the industry. It started back to the records that I could find. It started back in the 60s.
Right.
Where, this is when the culture of bigger guys got the main event started.
Right.
And also the fact that, it was a grueling time and they really did a lot to perform a ton, and they're going territory to territory to territory.
A lot of travel, a lot of hard work for not a lot of money.
Right. This is when wrestling was like pseudo there.
Right.
This is right before Golden Age. So drugs were prevalent, and it was even prevalent in the Carney days, because these guys would trade. Oh God, what was it? It was prescription medication between the different performers.
Right.
Especially with like the fire breathers. I don't know how the fire breathers came into it, but I saw a lot of evidence of like not necessarily like steroids.
Right.
Because a lot of them were very traditional in the wrestling, but they use a lot of very risky painkillers and also a lot of snake oil back in the day. So snake oil salesmen would go to these people and give them these snake oils that had like trace amounts of cocaine to alleviate
some
pressure in the joints. So that's how it really started.
Right. So, obviously with the rise of steroid usage in the 80s, 70s, and 80s.
And also, when they went through the South in the Carney days, another really fun one, they would get moonshine as payment. So that was another one that they started where they would pay them under the table with like little ounces of moonshine.
Right.
Yeah.
But, obviously with the way that the sport has been, obviously a lot of different sports have gone through their trials, their testing. Obviously baseball is a very famous example with all the drug trials that happened. Wrestling, of course, has its fair share of drug trials, but let's talk more about the rise of some of these, the modern era. Like what kinds of drugs were very prevalent, I guess, post-television introduction, because I know that steroid use increased a lot because, of course, the big guys on the big screen
got the main event.
Right, and Mr. McMahon still likes the big guys.
Right, the World Bodybuilding Federation was something that really hurt a lot of the guys because you had people like Lex Luger, who looked just like freaking awesome. Then you had Hulk Hogan, who came out and said that steroids were injected. There have been a lot of big trials as well, but we'll go into that later.
Right.
Then painkillers started to go around because then at that time, wrestling, they had to wrestle more frequently.
Right.
So,
and more touring, and there's not enough time for them to take a break, take a rest from the schedule.
They would take drugs that would hinder the necessary nervous system stuff for hunger.
Right.
They would do that. Also, it became really ugly around the 70s, 80s, though. That's when cocaine started to hit really big, especially because these wrestlers were celebrities. And they would go out and party and go to strip clubs and really do that kind of stuff.
Yep, sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Right, and especially in wrestling, when wrestling was the bee's knees at the time, they were making so much money.
Right.
And everybody knew them. They were celebrities.
Right. And so they got all the good stuff.
Right. They got the sex, they got a ton of alcohol. We're gonna tack alcohol into this because it is very important to some of the examples that we're gonna do.
Exactly. So let's talk about some famous examples of these abusive behaviors going into some of these prominent matches. Now I'm talking let's talk for example, Jeff Hardy's Victory Road match, a very famous incident where he went out and he was high and drunk, right?
So this is what happened. He got to the building very early in the morning, I believe, 9, 10 o'clock. He left after 12:30, and nobody knew where he was. He wasn't answering his phone, and he even has come out and said he had no idea what happened.
Right.
He showed back up, I think, very soon before his actual match happened. I think he showed up like an hour before. So nothing was planned as a part of the Sting Jeff Hardy match.
Right.
He was physically dragged into there. They have the thing is that he was pilled up to fuck.
Oh, he was pilled. I thought it was alcohol.
No, he was pilled. They believe that he was drunk, but it was definitely like a outside pill. Like the eyes were dead eyes.
Right.
You can even see it in the replays.
Right.
The referee they dragged him into gorilla position.
Right.
And the music was playing, and Hardy, to what I saw or to what I heard, he was like stumbling, like he was like swaying back and forth, head down. His face was painted and everything. But then he got up and stumbled up the stairs, and he got into the ring. Nobody stopped him, and I blame Bruce Pritchard for this because he was a producer on this show. This is the time when you have to ix the main event. I'm sorry, it's the main event, and I get it, but come on, that's embarrassing for the company.
So, anyways, that was one. Let's talk about Kerry Von Erich.
Kerry Von Erich obviously had a very big history of drug abuse, and especially when he got to WWF, it became a lot worse because in WCC,
did he ever go into the ring or into a match high or drunk?
I think somebody said almost 50% of the time he was pilled up to hell.
Right.
There are a couple of matches where you can see like his eyes were he was gone.
Right.
He wasn't there. Like
yeah.
And he was the steroid guy. He was steroids. He was pills. That was Kerry Von Erich. He was not a drunk. And all of the Von Erichs had it, but especially when Kerry got to WWF, that's when it became bad.
Right.
Because when he was WCCW, his father ran it.
Right. So any other prominent examples that you can think of besides those two?
So with wrestlers that went into the ring drunk, I believe X-Pac came out, especially in the early days of Impact or TNA. He would shoot up meth. Right, like he would pull down his tights, shoot meth into his ass, and pull him up and go out and do a match. He said that's how bad that got. Road Dogg has come out and said that he was drunk a couple of times when he was wrestling. There was the Alicia Fox incident at a live show, where I believe it was Michael Hayes allowed her to go out there, and she was, I saw some footage of it, she was really, really, really drunk.
Yeah.
She's come out and said that she really was, and I think she actually went to AA, so good on her at the very least.
Any other examples, though, that you can think of?
Nothing that really comes to mind. I'm pretty sure I'll get
let us know in the comments if you have any other examples.
I'm sure I'll get some flack of like, oh, this person had this and this was this. How did you not know that? That's like, okay.
Let's put it this way. There are many examples, but those are just some of the more prominent ones I think a lot of fans will know about.
And with also the fact of that professional wrestling, I think there was a study that professional wrestling and professional wrestlers generally die of that more than any others. Obviously, with Eddie Guerrero, he was clean, but the effects were just too much.
Right. So with the constricted time frame that we're working with on the show, obviously there's a lot more that we can cover. But let's talk about utilizing some of the problems of the past and storylines.
Right. So Jeff Hardy. Let's use a very
this
recent example.
This is an example that is actually still ongoing right now. WWE is using Jeff Hardy's personal demons within a storyline, and I've talked about the last week, because obviously it was on the pay-per-view, as to like what the morality of it was, and I still stand by it. But that's a very prominent example of utilizing real life problems for storylines.
Right. There it was Scott Hall in WCW, where his alcoholism was very much used. He would go into the ring with a drink in his hand. There was a spot where he so to what I've heard, I heard two different stories of this, where he puked on Bischoff. I heard from Hall that it was fake, that it wasn't actually puke, it was just like green peas and corn, essentially. He just chewed it up, had in his mouth, and to extend the storyline, he spit it at Bischoff, and Bischoff said no, it was definitely puke. He was drunk as a skunk.
So
that was
so
grotesque.
take of it what you will.
Even watching it back, it's really uncomfortable. Even 20 years after, it's really uncomfortable.
Right.
There was Road Warrior Hawk's alcoholism,
And we talked about that. They talked about that the Road
where
Warriors
he
episode.
climbed up on the Titantron
right.
and fell off of it, and
right where they talk. Yeah, and if you watch the Dark Side of the Ring, that episode, they do talk about that. So I do encourage you to actually go and talk about it. But I guess to conclude, what is let's talk about the wellness policy
Yes.
and how that has changed the game as far as drug use, abuse, and monitoring these signs and symptoms. Just to close off the show, of course.
For me personally, obviously McMahon had that very large steroid scandal in the early 90s,
Right.
where he was acquitted because there wasn't enough evidence to substantiate, because Hulk Hogan, the star witness on the opposition, decided to disclose. Yeah, you can't keep. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, so obviously he was acquitted for that.
Right.
The whole thing with Jeff Hardy got in a lot of trouble for that. ECW had a ton of it, but here's my thing: the wellness policy is a double-edged sword as a part of effectiveness.
Right.
Where CM Punk and I believe there were a couple of other wrestlers who came out and said that the wellness policy is just lip service to the effectiveness. They don't really care. And, when you take a concussion test, which is a part of that wellness policy, that he could listen to music and still pass on it, where he knows he has a concussion. The best person who would know that you have a fucking concussion is you would think. That obviously is very bad. And using Z-Packs all the time, which is another form of steroid.
Right.
It's a painkiller. And using that where it's just totally mismanaged. But then, for some weird reason, when something comes out that's outside of WWE's control, they really crank down on it. And when you don't file paperwork, it's against that policy.
Right.
That doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah, so obviously the WWE is the most well-known wellness policy. Other companies don't have to disclose whether or not they have wellness policies because most of them are private entities. But I would assume that places like AEW and Impact
have at least some kind of thing where they're not going to have somebody abusing the drugs.
Right. Obviously, WWE is very well known and very well publicized because it is a public company and they've had very public trials to it.
Right.
But obviously, it sounds like the effectiveness is again, it's a double-edged sword. Obviously, the wellness policy helped MVP with his. He didn't even know he had an issue. But that's why he wears that nose thing across the bridge of his nose.
What was that disease called? Where the
it's like Wolf something syndrome.
Yeah, it's Wolf something syndrome. He didn't even know he had it. There was another really big one too, where they didn't even know that there was like some kind of thing, and it was found because of the wellness policy.
So the wellness policy can be good in a lot of cases.
There might need to be some kind of reform about it.
Right.
And UFC uses USADA,
right,
which is fine, but USADA's been kind of weird about their bannings of things, and that's weird. So I think there needs to be another look at USADA and drug testing reform.
Right, but that obviously is not something that we cover on our channel. There's probably a political channel that does that.
Right. That's a whole other bag of worms, which we can go into later. But that's drugs in wrestling.
The basics. Let us know what your thoughts are. We will probably end up doing a more robust look at it. We might even look at individual wrestlers' profiles with regards to it because there's just so much information out there. But with the limited amount of time that we have, I just think that it's a good topic to at least dive your head into if it's something that interests you.
Right. Exactly.
And obviously, the reason that we are doing the podcast on Saturday instead of Sundays because Mothership is going to be in town tomorrow, so we will be preoccupied most likely.
Right.
Next week's topic, we don't have anything in the works yet, but there's no pay-per-view, so it's going to be a longer topic, and we will definitely let our fans know. Just follow us on social media, and you will know what's going on.
I already have some ideas, and I'll announce it on our social media. So yes, follow our social medias and keep up to date with that. And become a patron, because then you can watch the show with us, and we pretty much get drunk most of the time because WWE is annoying. But yes, and as always, be
majestic.
You're about to listen to the Pro Wrestling Zone podcast, a Majestic production property. One of the quickest rising professional wrestling podcasts on the market today, and the most entertaining podcast in the history of existence. Please note, before diving into the show, that this is for entertainment purposes only, so myself and Peanut Gallery engage in exaggerations, dirty or offensive jokes, and satirical comments. If you are a triggered little snowflake who gets professionally offended, this is not the podcast for you. If you do enjoy our work, we ask that you contribute to our Patreon page at patreon.com/majesticp. Contributors get access to the Discord, vote on what topic we cover, and enjoy exclusive content such as pay-per-view watch parties. Here's a sample of that from NXT TakeOver Portland. What about the other company that Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly went from?
Oh, ROH?
The one that they were signed exclusively to.
Oh, Ring of Honor?
Oh, that's going to be a lot of fun. Oh my God. I felt that in my hand. If this is something you believe you would enjoy, visit our Patreon at patreon.com/majesticp and become a patron. This ensures that we continue to entertain you for years to come. Without further ado, sit back and enjoy the show.